even if many are intercepted, which the majority of them, of course, will be. That also suggests sustained capability. At what point does this shift from a series of retaliatory strikes into exchange?
As being this great friend of the Kremlin, and his administration's proposals to end the war in Ukraine pretty much line up with what the Kremlin wants. It would be very difficult for Donald to hold a position of saying, oh, wait a minute, the Russians are helping kill American soldiers. That, you can be sure, is an issue that the Democrats in the House and the Senate, that is in Congress, in hearings are going to explore. And those on the Intelligence and Armed Services Committee are not going to be happy if, in fact, the evidence holds up that efforts by the Iranians to strike back are being guided by Russian military intelligence.
Right. And we also saw Trump rejected negotiations, suggesting the campaign could continue until all potential Iranian leaders are eliminated. How dangerous that situation could be, you know, if Iran ends up like Lebanon?
Well, there's certainly, assume a significant risk here that the way Trump is approaching this could lead to a failed state. On the other hand, there's a lot of bench strength among the Iranians, among both the clerics and the military. So our effort to degrade the military and the theocracy certainly is going to result in new leaders, but they might be worse leaders than the ones who are already in power from the point of view of Washington and Tel Aviv. This idea that we're going to just kill until we've eliminated any opposition is rather bizarre. Trump did, in his post Saturday morning, suggest that the U.S. might pursue a policy of just mass killing. And Pete Hegseth, the hard-drinking Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, he similarly made incredibly aggressive comments that are not in line with how the U.S. military has ever operated. They would be in line with the way the Russian military has operated all the way back to the era of the boyars, the aristocrats in the Tsarist era, which is to pay no attention to any kind of rules of international warfare, and to make hospitals where babies are being delivered, old folk homes, schools and train stations legitimate targets. That would be an awful development if it happens as a new American policy.
Yes. And you know, U.S. President, we also saw him address the UK's Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, directly, saying that they don't need people to join after the war has already been won. Is he just upset about UK's initial hesitation towards supporting this US and Israel's move towards Iran?
Assume Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, who is not in a strong position with his parliament, tried to make a very legalistic sort of argument. We're not involved in this war. We don't have a dog in it. The only things we've done are defensive. I don't think the Ayatollahs are going to draw that fine technical distinction that Starmer wanted. Starmer clearly does not want to get his country drawn into this war. However, they've been more cooperative than Germany, France, and the Nordic countries. They've allowed American aircraft to land, to refuel, and let pilots rest and whatnot at military bases that they have. So the British shouldn't be surprised that they've been a target of the leadership, whoever that is at the moment, in Tehran. And Donald, it just runs down other people. It's just his nature. He attacks the closest allies of the U.S. left and right. When he was in the casino business, he would call his own executives idiots, even when they were making money for him hand over fist and doing better than competing casinos. It's just his nature. Everybody is horrible, terrible, and that's projection by him about who he is inside, an empty vessel who's never known a day of joy, love, contentment, and you're seeing projection by him.
Right. And thank you for highlighting that, Professor. Professor. And last but not least, how do you analyze the current alignment of Europe towards US? You briefly mentioned some countries already.
Well, the Europeans have a difficult needle to thread. They're all very aware that Putin has ambitions to go beyond Ukraine if he's successful there. The Baltic republics are likely the next target, but Poland could be as well, for example. And so the Europeans want to keep Donald on the ranch. They don't want him to completely walk away from them. They don't want to have NATO destroyed. And so they have to figure out how to manipulate him and how to move him. And Donald is, of course, incredibly subject to flattery. All the times I negotiated with him, I always walked away with what I wanted or more, because all you have to do is flatter him and make him feel that, you know, he's really special. And then he'll give away the store. So
Yes.
the European countries also are not necessarily united. I mean, the Scandinavian countries have said, you fly in our airspace to Netanyahu, for example, we will arrest you as a war criminal. The Scandinavian nations are not going to support this whatsoever, whereas you've seen Britain sort of nose around trying to figure out where exactly do we position ourselves here with the legalistic approach, and now the reported, and I don't know that it's true because Trump is the source of it, the reported offer to send British warships to the region. So you're going to see a lot of complex negotiations between the various European nations and the US, but in the background, keep in mind that Western Europe, the EU and NATO countries do not want Putin to go beyond Ukraine, and that's going to heavily influence their decisions.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston, for sharing that. Please do stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Israel. Israel's President Isaac Herzog has stated that no action will be taken on Prime Minister Netanyahu's pardon request while the nation is at war. In an interview, Herzog has emphasized that he respects US President Donald Trump, but Israel is a sovereign state and all decisions must follow Israeli law. He has explained that as head of state, he holds limited powers, including the ability to pardon, but must consider opinions from relevant authorities before acting on it. Meanwhile, Trump has repeatedly called for Netanyahu's pardon, saying the prime minister should focus solely on the war with Iran. Herzog had also clarified that the ongoing conflict takes precedence and no proceedings regarding the pardon are currently being considered. Furthermore, he has stressed that internal cases in Israel are handled according to the nation's legal process, regardless of external pressures. However, Herzog acknowledges his respect for Trump, describing him as a leader changing history while reaffirming his sworn duty to Israeli law. Let's listen into what the Israeli president has shared.
I said that I will consider everything seriously, but I'm obliged under the process and under Israeli law to await opinions that must be given to me by the relevant authorities. And that is why, of course, everything is on the table, but it has to be done according to Israeli law. I respect President Trump tremendously, honestly, and I take the brunt with a lot of affection and respect to him because he's the leader of the free world who's changing history. But on the merits of a case, which is an internal case in Israel, I am obliged, I'm sworn in, and I'm the president of the State of Israel.
Now we welcome back Mr. David K. Johnston. He's an author and journalist, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston, for staying with us. Now, you know, of course, this is not the very first time that President Trump has requested a pardon for, or pressured this Israeli government for Netanyahu. Why this soft spot for Netanyahu in particular?
Well, it isn't just Netanyahu. Donald admires dictators. He thinks of himself as the dictator of the whole world. He just doesn't have totally consolidated power. And he believes all the rest of us, you know, unless we are doing his bidding, we're idiots, we're unworthy, we're unfit. And then Donald has no respect for criminal law. when he was a casino owner and as a condition of his license could not associate with known criminals, he was a business partner of one of the biggest cocaine traffickers in America. And he did extraordinary favors for this 3-time convicted felon that I describe in my biography of Trump, The Making of Donald Trump. And those favors make absolutely no sense whatsoever unless they were in the cocaine business together, in which case they all make sense. And this is true of Trump's relationships with others. Trump has often tried to posture that, well, you know, I was in New York construction and I had to deal with mobsters. Absolutely true. But there's plenty of evidence that he has gratuitously gone out of his way to be involved with Albanian mobsters, Middle East mobsters, Jewish mobsters, Russian mobsters. It's just who he is. He has been a career criminal. He's not, to be clear, he's a white-collar criminal. He doesn't break people's legs. He doesn't have people shot, at least not when he was a businessman. He cheats with broken promises, contracts, refusals to pay, and other techniques that white-collar criminals use. And in fact, I'm going to be teaching white-collar crime at the university where I'm a professor, Rochester Institute of Technology, this fall, because I've written extensively about it and covered it for decades. So it's important to understand when Donald says he wants Netanyahu to get a pardon, he believes world leaders who are in his favor that they shouldn't be subject to any law whatsoever. And in Bibi's case, you know, it is internal corruption. It's bribery, breach of duty. Those are serious crimes. Donald doesn't think that bribery and extortion are crimes if he's the beneficiary of them.
Yes. And last but not least, how do you analyze this timing of, you know, is there any connection between this Israel's war towards Iran and election of Netanyahu?
Well, Netanyahu's trial is on hiatus right now because of the war. So, yeah, it's a good question, Suma. Why would Trump bring this up at this moment? And I think it's part of a reassurance to Bibi that he is together with him, that they're united. There is, after all, large opposition in Israel, both to Gaza and to a lesser degree, for sure, what's happening in the attack on Iran. So Trump needs to make sure that he keeps Netanyahu close to him and reassures him of his support. And of course, Netanyahu, you know, grew up in the U.S. He's a graduate of a suburban Philadelphia high school. So he has long ties to the U.S. that Trump would want to protect. If Netanyahu were to be convicted at the end of his trial, I wouldn't be shocked if Donald Trump said, we're going to fly you out of Israel to the U.S. and give you asylum.
With that, I'd like to thank Mr. David K. Johnston for joining us today and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Russia-Ukraine. At least 10 people, including 2 children, have been killed after a Russian ballistic missile struck a residential building in Kharkiv. Rescue operations are ongoing, with specialists from other regions helping to clear rubble and search for bodies. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has stated that 16 others were injured and damage to 19 residential buildings has been reported, alongside attacks on energy, railway, and port infrastructure. Ukrainian air defense units intercepted 453 drones and 19 missiles, though 9 missiles and 26 drones hit 22 sites across the country. Meanwhile, Zelenskyy has urged international partners to continue air defense support and weapon supplies, describing the strike as horrific. In Kyiv, several districts have suffered power cuts after energy facilities were hit, affecting thousands of residents, authorities have said. Furthermore, the attacks come amid Russia's wider bombardment targeting military-industrial complexes, highlighting the ongoing threat to civilian areas. Let's listen into what the Ukrainian president has shared.
Зараз у Харкові тривають роботи на місці удару по житловому будинку. Російський удар – це була звичайна багатоповерхівка. Станом на зараз відомо, що 10 людей загинули. Серед загиблих – діти, дівчина. Їй було 13 років, хлопчик, йому було 9. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. Додатково залучені фахівці з інших областей для розбору завалів з Полтавщини, Сумщини, шукають тіла людей під завалами. Страшний удар. Також 16 людей було поранені. Усім надається необхідна допомога. Масований удар по цивільних в Києві та в інших регіонах, зокрема по об'єктах енергетики. Я хочу відзначити сьогодні наших українських паралімпійців. Перший день змагань і вже 6 українських медалей, 3 золота, 1 срібло, 2 бронзи. Важливо, що український прапор та український гімн зараз в Італії звучатимуть гордо і помітно. Помітно, зокрема, тим аморальним спортивним функціонерам, які допустили в час загарбницької війни росіян на змагання та дозволили їм нести свій прапор війни.
Now we welcome Colonel Sanjay Sirohi. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Colonel, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this war, do you think Ukraine is benefiting, or now that Iran war has started, do you think Ukraine is benefiting from this situation? Since although Ukraine is dependent on Western support, which is now being shared with other countries in GCC and US, but these countries are now looking at Ukraine to buy Ukraine's latest technology in its battle-tested weaponry. What's your take?
Good morning, Asuma.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for having me on your channel.
Thank you.
Now, if you see, this war is going on for more than 4 years. And if you see the destruction which has taken place in Ukraine is enormous. In fact, the total country has been destroyed. Now, if you see that with the war going on, with America getting involved in Iran war, Americans and Israelis, so as a result of that, there are 2 things which we have to look into. Firstly, the air defense system, especially the patriotic missiles which were provided to Ukraine for the air defense of Ukraine, most of them have been shifted or they will be transferred to the Middle East. So that is one thing which is going to create problem for Ukraine. Number 2, now with the spring coming up, the Russians are planning to launch a spring offensive which will be more devastating for the Ukrainians. So I think this is prelude to the strikes on the residential buildings and on energy infrastructure, is prelude to a major offensive being planned by the Russians on Ukraine. So Ukraine is going to have a problem, and European countries will not be able to support, although their endeavor is to support Ukraine, because they think that after the Ukraine invasion and after the victory in Ukraine, the Russians may not stop and they may move towards Poland. So Poland may be the next country where the Russians are going to invade, because if we see in last 3-4 years, there is no international law, there is no rule of land. Anybody who has got might, he is right. So anybody who wants to invade any country, they are doing it. So I think with this as a background, Ukraine has to be very, very careful, and they have to be prepared for the spring offensive. Asuma.
And how do you analyze the current capacity of Europe? Earlier they had enough to support Ukraine as well as supporting themselves and slowly increasing their cooperation towards NATO's defense budget, increasing that. And now that this war in Iran has started, do you think they can still balance both?
No, it will be very difficult for the European countries because they don't know what is coming. And with the, UK has been involved. Initially, UK was reluctant to join the American forces, but now the UK has been forced to join this Iran war. Then there are other countries also who may get involved in Iran war, because we never know for how long this Iran war is going to stay put. So in that case, I think the Europeans have to balance it out between either keeping Mr. Donald Trump happy about it by supporting him in Iran, or antagonizing him by not supporting in Iran but supporting in Ukraine. So it is a very, very difficult balancing act for the countries, especially the Western European countries like France, Germany, Britain, to stay out of this Iran war. So I think it will create more problems for Ukraine, and the support of Ukraine may decrease in coming months. Asuma.
Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to thank retired Colonel Sanjay Sirohi for sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on. The United States has launched a new regional security initiative aimed at tackling drug cartels across the Western Hemisphere. At the Shield of the Americas summit in Florida, President Donald Trump signed a proclamation formally creating the coalition alongside more than a dozen Latin American and Caribbean leaders. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the partnership will focus on security cooperation while also expanding economic opportunities across the region. He has added that economic progress cannot be achieved without stability. The initiative seeks to build a regional front against drug cartels and organized crime, with some leaders backing a tougher law enforcement approach. Officials also warned about harmful foreign influence in the region, a reference widely seen.
Everybody, bienvenido. Thank you for coming and being a part of this very important initiative. It's a critical initiative. Obviously, we start with a strong focus on security, but there's so much more here, and as you've seen from so much more we can work together on. And as you've seen from the cabinet members that are here today, again, on behalf of the president, he is currently on his way to Dover Air Force Base to receive, sadly, the remains of the 6 Americans who lost their lives in the operation against Iranian terrorism. And so he apologizes for not being able to join us for this lunch, but he knew you would understand. But he's very excited about this initiative, and I'm personally very excited to be part of this with each of you today. It's a top priority for us. And while there are clearly a focus on the security of the hemisphere, as you can see from the representation in our cabinet, from trade to commerce to energy to treasury, and there is also a focus very strongly on the opportunities we have to work together economically. But you can't have economic progress without security. And as evidence of the president's strong commitment to this initiative, so that this is not just going to be something that we meet one time and have conversations and we meet once a year and put out a paper. We want it to be an issue of action. He has appointed Secretary Noem as the special envoy dedicated to this relationship. And you will see a lot of her. She'll be very involved with each of you at a personal level and on a daily and weekly and monthly level.
So I do want to thank the president for creating this and for giving me the honor and the opportunity to serve as a special envoy to this region, to the Western Hemisphere. This Shield of Americas will be a powerful example to the rest of the world about what's possible. There's nothing like this happening today anywhere else in the world. And the way that we cooperate on our shared ideals of freedom and of democracy and safety and security will be a shining light to all of those who wish to be more like all of us.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.